Hello, I'm Pat O'Keefe, and I'm going to talk today about the O'Keefe Electronics Wi-Fi Hive Scale. First, I'm going to spend some time talking about the scale itself, and then I'm going to show a lot of examples of what beekeepers can learn and have learned from the data. The product consists of two major parts. There's a sensor, which is a dual beam load cell with brackets to slide it under one edge of the hive. I call it a half scale or a hinge scale. And since the bees build out uniformly, a pretty accurate representation of the weight is obtained. And as you see the data in a little bit, you'll see there's ample detail of information about the health of the hive to help the beekeeper manage his hives. And this design actually makes it easy to add it under an existing live colony. The second component is the electronic assembly, and that's usually mounted on the lower super close by. The product was designed with the difficult, challenging environment that the hive scales or the hives are actually in. I've designed systems that go on over the highway trucks, electronic systems, and this is every bit as challenging. And it was designed and tested in 4 seasons in northern Ohio before we sold it. You have sleet, rain, hail, and snow. Temperature cycling. At night you might see minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and then as the sun rises and shines on the electronics, it'll bring that case up to maybe 135 degrees in just a few hours with direct sunshine hitting it. Also, there was a hive scale that was in Johns Island, South Carolina, which is totally surrounded by salt water. Salt is in all the dew and the precipitation, and the product is designed to withstand those kinds of rough environments. Not to mention that the beekeepers typically lift and drop supers on the scale, 30 pounds apiece. The Wi-Fi Hive Scale is designed to last indefinitely for many years of use. Now, I'm going to have a few slides that kind of show some of the installations that we've seen happen over the past years. Here we have Langstroth hives. This particular hive is in Ohio, and this particular beekeeper is an electrician. He had access to telephone poles, and it was suitable for using the Wi-Fi Hive Scale. A North Carolina beekeeper has rails. This is what it typically looks like, mounted under a Langstroth hive. And finally, a Norwegian Langstroth hive mounted on rails again in Norway. Here's an example of a beekeeper that used a top bar hive, and it readily adapts to use with a single sensor on one side like this. Or here's another where he's outfitted it with a dual sensor approach. There's a sensor on each end of the hive. Here's an example of a Langstroth long hive, which is popular in Australia. And you can see the sensors and the electronics. In this particular case, I think there's a sensor on the other side of this too, with a dual sensor, multi-sensor approach. Here the beekeeper, again in Australia, didn't want to walk to check his bait hives. And you can see that he successfully saw this and emailed me all excited that he finally had response to his bait hive. I also have, it's also been used on a flow hive. I don't have a picture of that at this time. So the beekeeper receives his load cell and electronic unit, and he can attach it to his access point, or to the network, Wi-Fi network in his location. We provide a lot of text and video to assist with deploying the scale onto a Wi-Fi network. The beekeeper can hike one side of the hive and slide the sensor under and watch the data flow. He just has to be careful he doesn't get addicted to the data, or we'll have to do intervention. Beekeeper can add an unlimited number of scales to the access point. You might ask, what if my hives are in a remote location away from an access point? And for that situation, we offer a cellular hotspot. It's installed in the first scale, and that scale plus 9 others for a 10 total can be attached to the network and report up to the server. We've arranged in the USA, we've arranged for an AT&T SIM card for a tiny data plan that ends up being about $1 a month per hive. And so, and in foreign countries, beekeepers are encouraged to find similar plans locally. This is the first of several charts that I'm going to show that is typical of the output from the Wi-Fi Hive Scale that you can see up on the website for your hive. On the left here, we see the scale for weight, and on the right, we see the scale for temperature. This is the ambient temperature, and the temperature sensor is located inside the electronic enclosure. And the color of the chart in the chart matches the scale, so the temperature is blue and the weight is black. Here we see that the weight is about just over 126 pounds, and every time it drops and comes back is another day, because the bees leave the hive and go out and forage and return on a daily basis. The first day that you put the scale under the hive, you will see, you will know the strength of the hive. When you have 2 to 2.5 pounds of bees leaving daily to forage, that's indicative of a very strong hive. This particular hive happens to be in the fall, and you can see that the size of the colony is larger than the resources that they are able to gather. So every day you see the weight dropping, which means the bees are consuming their stores and they're not able to gather enough nectar at this time of year. Here's another slide that shows the health of the hive over time. This one is a top bar hive in Oregon, and this is a really strong hive. In the early parts of the nectar run season, you see 3.6 pounds of bees come and go daily. And you can see the queen manage this size of the colony over time, and starting to move into fall, you may have one pound of bees that are leaving daily. So she's shrinking it down in preparation for winter. Once you see data like this from a healthy hive, you'll be able to then use that as a gold standard to know when you have issues with another hive that you're measuring, to see if it deviates from a trend like this. Here's an example of a hive robbing event. The hive was actually swarmed in early October, and the hive was then robbed subsequently by other bees. 5 pounds a day are removed. And you can notice here that it's, when it gets below this temperature, about 54 degrees, you'll see that there's no robbing going on because the bees can't fly. But on the days when the weather is warm enough for them to fly, you can see they continue the downward. They're continuing to rob the hive. So they lost between October 2nd and November 20th, 54 pounds were taken. Now, this particular beekeeper had a hive scale. Why didn't he do something about this? Well, it turns out his laptop was broken, and he didn't catch it. Here's an example of when beekeepers saw the weight drop quickly. And that's the other thing, you'd like to have a remote access to your data, because when a hive does have a catastrophic event, it's usually quickly. The beekeeper saw the weight drop and was able to stop the robbing. It went from 104 pounds down to around 94 pounds in just a few hours. Here's an example of a hive that went queenless. Here you see hives. The hive is strong, 2 pounds of bees leaving and coming back daily. You have a nectar run going on as this increases. And then it kind of flattens out a little bit. And something happens to the queen about here. They don't forage anymore. They start to consume the honey stores. They're partying. So it dropped from about 10 pounds over 10 days. And I'd also like to point out that this particular scale had the humidity temperature sensor, although the beekeeper had it hanging outside of his hive. The humidity is shown here. It's in green, 100%. It's hanging outside where it probably picked up the dew. And the outside temperature matches the so-called hive temperature that's red. This is just a quick slide to show how the data from an in-hive temperature and humidity sensor presents the data in the graph. Here we see the green data is shown over here to the right as percent humidity, and it looks like it's running around 60%. And the red line is the hive temperature, which is sitting at about 34 degrees C, which is 93 degrees F. This hive is in Norway. The beekeeper appears to have placed it in the brood chamber, and it's amazingly consistent. The temperature is amazingly consistent there. The bees control that. They control the humidity as well. Beekeepers tell me that the hive humidity and temperature is most important in winter to make sure that the hive can be ventilated to assist with issues that can arise from condensation dripping into the colony and freezing. Although one beekeeper did ask the question, what happens to the brood chamber temperature and humidity when the hive becomes queenless? And I'm still waiting for somebody to send back that example. Okay, here's where a swarm is recognized and stopped. The beekeeper had a really high nectar run here. And here it slows down. It's like it appears that all the resources of the hive are preparing for a swarm at this point. And in this case, the beekeeper caught the swarm. He was able to arrest the swarm. I don't know what he did exactly, but he did see that this was swarming and able to stop it. The beekeeper in Cedar Rapids, Iowa sent me this. He saw dearth. He took a super of honey on August 27th. He said it was a very large colony of bees, 80,000 bees. He saw the weight drop, and the bees became aggressive. He'd see that the weight's, not doing what he thought it should do at this time based on the weather and everything else. And he determined that the bees didn't have, the sufficient floral arrangements and so forth to support the size of the colony. And so he determined that he needed to start feeding them. And so he did that. And he saved the hive. It actually survived into the next season. Here's a hive in Oregon. This is a top bar hive again, where the beekeeper, this is October, and you can see that the hive's alive and it's well, and it's the weight is, the bees are consuming some level of stores. And then in mid-January, it got warm enough outside It's just above 50-ish or so, and the bees decided that they're going to rob the other hives in the area. And they were robbing 2.3 pounds per day, and brought back the weight to the level that it was in late fall. This slide illustrates a feature of the Wi-Fi Hive Scale that allows you to see bee orientation flights. And this was requested by Australian beekeepers. When we first started shipping this unit, it would transmit every hour. They asked for transmissions to happen much faster, and so we set it up to transmit every 1.5 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes, all selectable from the website by the beekeeper for the scale. They nicknamed it the rapid fire mode. So this data is on an Australian long Langstroth hive, and the transmission is set at 5-minute intervals so that they can see these orientation flights. The orientation flights happen in the afternoons on subsequent days. You can see by these green circles. And this one is blown up larger down here so we can discuss it a little bit in more detail. The bees leave in the morning early and start to forage, and you can see them bringing back nectar. But in the afternoon, there's an unexplained weight drop that overshadows the nectar gathering activity. And what's happening here is that young bees are going to flight school, and they all leave the hive and they learn about the appearance of the hive, position of landmarks, landscapes, the movement of the sun, and so forth. This is an indication of the laying capability of the queen and the strength of the hive. This is this is just for fun. There was a full eclipse that came across the United States in 2017. Started up in Oregon, came diagonally across the United States, and exited in South Carolina. And this was a hive on Johns Island, South Carolina. And you can see here that the bees came back on August 29th at 4:29 p.m. So you can basically see that they came back and stayed. Okay, on August 30th they came back around 6:20 p.m. August 31st they came back at 1:14 p.m. and they did not go back out. So they came back when the sun darkened, and they did not go back out. They stayed in a safe place, pre-programmed by the creator. So in summary, the Wi-Fi Hive Scale provides the beekeeper with profound knowledge of the hive. With a Wi-Fi Hive Scale, you will know almost as much as the queen knows about her hive. You'll know the strength of the hive the very first day you put it on under the hive. You can discover, then prevent, or stop swarms. You can spot dearth conditions and help the colony survive during drought times to live another day. You can identify robbing early and halt the condition and save your honey stores. You can pinpoint the loss of a queen and take action. You can see disease when you compare a given hive against what you know is a normal, healthy behavior of a hive from previous information that you've gathered. And you can use it to test out your own ideas. So, the O'Keefe Electronics Wi-Fi Hive Scale is designed for the challenging environment that the hive finds itself in around the world. It provides profound knowledge about the status of the hive. It can be easily installed on a variety of hive platforms, even if they're filled with bees. And the Wi-Fi Hive Scale pays for itself when just one catastrophic event is caught. Check it out on WiFiHivescale.com.